to acknowledge the legacy of Ms. Bowles, and I am humbled to be serving in that position, and I have enormous shoes to fill, and I aspire to live up to that legacy every day. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak after and feel really inspired by her story. I also wanted to thank the West Point leadership for their remarks and their commitment to this component of the People Strategy and to diversity, equity, and inclusion writ large. It is extremely meaningful to have the West Point leadership talk so eloquently and with such commitment to the importance of diversity and national security and making those linkages both internal at West Point and externally to the public. This is kind of it's literally a fortress here, right? And so when people look and they see this place, and they see the uniforms, and they see, you know, how they feel apart. They feel like it's very distant. And for the leadership team and the cadets and everybody who represents this incredible work to go out and tell this story, it makes a huge difference, and it penetrates what the misapprehensions there may be in the public for us for you all to stand in uniform and tell the story of how important diversity is and how it shores up what we're doing at West Point and in the Army. So thank you so much for that. General Gilland, I'm a lawyer, so I talked to him at the break, and I said he opened the door to talking about the testimony. So here I am. I actually let him know how impressed I was at the testimony. It was a really challenging day for our armed services. I think I'm going to channel my Command Sergeant Major Craven for a second here. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that the work that we're doing at this conference and broadly in DEI is under inspection by the public. It's being challenged, and to have General Gilland sit in Congress and testify as to the values of what we're doing here, not what people are distorting it to be or, you know, sprinkling buzzwords around about what it is, but talking about why it is the core of building lethal, cohesive teams in order to deliver national security to the force. I was incredibly impressed by the way he presented and framed DEI. It is our strength. It is our competitive advantage over our near-peer adversaries. And to question whether or not homogeneous armies are anywhere near the measure or the match of the US Army is a fallacy. So I am very impressed by that representation, and I would appreciate a round of applause for it. General Reeve, General Robinson, Sergeant Major Craven, Sergeant Major Barretto, I'm honored to be here alongside you today. Thank you all for your dedication to the force. I'm Yvette Bourcicot. My long title means that I am in charge of all of the people policies, and DEI is an incredibly important component. We are working towards moving DEI from being, I don't want to say a bolt-on, but something that's kind of over here, and infusing it into our strategy, how we recruit, how we train, how we acquire, how we employ, and making sure that at the core of that is our diverse fighting formations and making sure that they interact well together. So I'm going to do an audience participation thing because I think that's fun. Raise your hand if you're from the South. Okay, all right. Raise your hand if you're from the North. And from the West Coast, West side. East Coast. Okay, all right. If your parents were born in this country, raise your hand. And if they were born outside the United States. Okay. And if someone in your family has served. Okay. And if you're the first one to serve in your family. All right. Now, this is the real killer. If you think tomato-based barbecue sauce is the real barbecue sauce, raise your hand. All right. And if you think that abomination with mustard is barbecue sauce, raise your hand and admit your shame. Oh my gosh. I do that just to illustrate. We're from all over the place, right? I'm gonna ask like the real serious question. Raise your hand if you love the United States. And raise your hand if you love the United States Army. Even you guys in the Air Force, me too, okay? All right, raise your hand. Everybody should have raised their hands. That kind of that tells the story of how varied and diverse we are in this room and how we're working together for a common goal. We are united by our values at the end of the day. It's not about left or right or up or down or north or south. It's about our values. The Army values are loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. They lead us both in and out of uniform towards better teamwork, discipline, and commitment. West Point cadets, graduates, and faculty embody these values by default, and at the point where they leave, after they've been under the tutelage of the leadership, without even realizing it. Similar to the Army, West Point strives to create unity not only through unified values, but through diverse formations where every soldier feels safe and included. But like our Army, West Point's diversity did not blossom overnight. And we love our history. Soup led off with the history. I'm staying at their hotel, and I love looking at all the graduates. So history is just steeped here. So if you'll permit me a tangent, I'm gonna kind of frame where we are and where we're going. Between 1870 and 1899, only 12 African American cadets were admitted to West Point. While all students, I think it's still the tradition, face a form of ritual college hazing, these cadets were bullied and harassed by their peers because of their race. Because of physical and emotional mistreatment throughout their undergraduate careers, only 3 black cadets reached that graduation in that first class. And as many of you know, women weren't admitted to West Point until 1976. Even when accepted, female cadets faced high rates of sexism for their male counterparts and were excluded from their formations. And when the inaugural class of female cadets graduated in 1980, only 61 of the original 119 walked the stage to receive their diplomas and commissions. And the fact that Ms. Locke is here representing that class, and she is a robust young woman at that, it tells you, it frames in the historical context that we are not that far removed from that. We have come a long way, but it has not been that far. And that's inspiring to me, right? Like 1980 was not that long ago. I know the cadets. I know the cadets are like, oh, that's ancient history, but it's really not. It's right here. And I think that tells you how much of a learning institution the Army is. And I'm incredibly excited about what we're going to be doing for the next 20 years. So we started off slowly, but as an institution, West Point and the Army learns what happens when we give people a fair chance to serve. They achieve and they excel. Women now represent 24% of the West Point undergraduate population. More than 5,000 women have graduated since 1980, with over 1,900 of them receiving their commission within the last 10 years. In this decade alone, we've seen a 129% increase in black cadets walking the stage at West Point, and we're hopeful that this trend continues. We also know that Asian and AAPI cadets make up 10% of West Point's recent class. Ying Sing was West Point's first Chinese graduate in 1909. He eventually went on to serve as the English secretary to the president of Tsinghua University, and he made it to the rank of lieutenant general before retiring at 51. We had a question about religious diversity earlier, and I wanted to acknowledge that. Anmol Narang, an American Indian woman, became the first observant Sikh graduate to graduate from West Point in 2020, and was followed by 2 other practicing Sikh cadets in later classes. West Point's diversity clubs, which many of you know, are a cornerstone of cadet life, now include more than 4 clubs that are dedicated to Asian AAPI culture and community, including the Asian Pacific Forum, the Japanese Forum, the Korean American Relations Seminar, and the Vietnamese American Cadet Association. Hispanic and Latino presence continues to grow at West Point, and that's in no small part due to those who came before. Antonio Barrios, a Guatemalan national, was not only the first Hispanic or Latino to graduate from West Point, but was also among the first international students to receive his commission from the academy. He would move back to Guatemala and eventually became the Guatemalan Minister of Works. So it's just obvious that when we give people a chance and when we let them know that they can come here and be someone, they are able to strive and thrive. The progress that we've made here at West Point mirrors the diversity that we see in the Army's ranks. We know as the Army leadership that we're still far from where we need to be. Even as I highlight some of West Point's most impressive graduates, ranging from all different types of backgrounds, there's still gaps that we have failed to reach, and there are stories that are still left untold. We still experience a lack of connection generally with the American people and specifically with underrepresented communities. And as a result, we often miss untapped pools of young, talented people who are ready to serve our nation. In short, we haven't always gotten it right, but Bulls Conference, we're gonna work towards getting there. We are gonna work on reaching out to communities we haven't engaged with and to tell the Army story. So admitting a diverse pool of highly qualified candidates into our military academies, and specifically into West Point, is not just about racial and gender equity in the Army in the United States, which is important. Fairness is a fundamental American value, but it's also about seeking out and finding people that have the potential for excellence, whoever they may be, and bringing them into our Army. We know that a more inclusive and powerful force will draw strength from the unique experiences and backgrounds of all its members. By using innovative solutions to field our formations with the best and brightest, we're strengthening our national defense and contributing to our warfighting effort. We're working on recruiting talented people from all parts of the country. We do this by forming strategic partnerships with non-federal entities like the Army Diversity Outreach and Inclusion Team, which consists of commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers engaging diverse audiences and communities in order to share the Army story. And we're also leveraging the deep institutional knowledge that already exists within the Army. Dr. Schaefer, my boss, is not here today because she is kicking off the WIT, the Women's Initiative Team. The WIT was established this past June as a launching pad for Army representatives to advocate for policy, program, and resource changes impacting women in the Army. And it's got representation across gender, race, rank, civilian, and we're really proud to kick off that effort. As a diverse, all-volunteer force, we're responding to societal trends in order to recruit, train, and retain soldiers who will prepare our Army to fight and win our nation's wars. We are innovating with our Future Soldier Prep course and bringing that opportunity to people who may not, to the point about standards, meet the standards right now, but we are creating opportunities for them to meet the standard. I'd also like to respond to the comment about moving away from conversations about racial diversity or religious diversity or other kind of like traditional ways of describing DE&I, talking maybe about geographical diversity to deflect some of the controversy around it. And I think we really do need to have an honest conversation. I'm from Maryland. Everybody's talking about where they're from. I'm from Maryland. I'm also confused by state pride, because if Maryland kind of broke off and floated away, I wouldn't care, except my parents are still on it. So I'm like everybody who's like super New Jersey, like I don't get it. But my identity is really tied tied to. I'm a woman. I'm black. Surprise. I am a disabled veteran, right? Those are the things that really I lead with. I think my geographic identity is, it's important, you know, north, south, there's different things, barbecue sauce. But I think engaging with people where they are is an authentic way to engage with them. And I think leaving those things aside because it's a difficult conversation isn't the right way to go. I think that the country has not done enough to reckon with some of the differences that we've had. And I'm very impressed by the efforts that West Point has made in talking about those differences, teaching the cadets how to think about them, not what to think, and carrying those thoughts forward for us to achieve the mission together. So we're off schedule. I'm going to help you out, Ms. Benitez, and I'm going to cut my remarks a little bit shorter. But I am very, very proud of the work that's being done here at West Point. Army MNRA supports all of this work. We are fighting for a diverse Army that is cohesive, an innovative Army that is strong, a lethal Army that is ready. I thank you all for being here today. Your commitment to our Army and diversity and inclusion of our personnel isn't just inspiring, it is pivotal. As we move forward, let's continue drawing upon the widest possible set of backgrounds, talents, and skills, have honest conversations about them, and maximize our collective efforts to strengthen the total force. Together, we'll create a strong and ready Army of 2030. Thank you. Be Navy.
Ma'am, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and just for inspiring us. And also, as I said earlier, thank you for staying both days here. She's not leaving today. She'll be at the reception tonight, so if you had any questions for her, you'll have the opportunity to engage with her then, and she'll be here tomorrow as well. So this is a small token of our appreciation. I did not say we are going to adjust. We Army Strong, we figured things out on the fly here. So what we're doing is Colonel Caprice Brownslade, she's going to join Mr. Terry Albritton after lunch. So we will be doing a combined session for the workshop. And so right now we're going to transition over to Dr. Rachel Yon and the Combating Terrorism panel. Rachel Yon is the Executive Director of our Combating Terrorism here at West Point. And if Rachel and her panel could come up. And then after this, I'll have a few comments before lunch, and then we'll have lunch and get back on schedule. I appreciate everybody's flexibility, and I know we all really enjoyed this morning's session so far. Thank you.
So welcome to our panel on diversity and national security views from the academia and practice. As Lisa said, my name is Rachel Yon, and I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator. I am an associate professor in the Department of Social Sciences, and I am the executive officer for the Combating Terrorism Center. I also have the honor to serve as the chair of the Dean's Diversity Committee, and I teach one of the required classes in our diversity minor here. You already have the biographies of our panelists, and unfortunately Ms. Ahmad was not able to make it this morning. So what we were going to do is have our panelists speak for about 10 to 15 minutes each. I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions from the audience. I will start off with the first question for both of our panelists to talk, and then I will reach out to the audience, specifically to cadets. So see a few out there that I know, so get ready. Hopefully you will have good questions. So we will start with our first speaker, Mr. Ravi Satkalmi. He serves as the Director of Intelligence for the U.S. Capitol Police, and in his role, he and his team are charged with identifying and interdicting threats to the U.S. Capitol and members of Congress.
All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here. I do have my phone out. I'm going to ask for some forgiveness for that. I left my notebook at home, so not texting, but using some notes here. But good morning, everybody. My name is Ravi Satkalmi. I'm the Director for Intelligence for U.S. Capitol Police, a position I've been at now for just over a year. Prior to that, I was at NYPD serving as Director for Intelligence Analysis over their counterterrorism intelligence shop there. And then prior to that, I was at DIA for about 3.5, 4 years, working as an AFPAC analyst. And you know, my kind of journey into the national security world was, I think, a little, I wouldn't say convoluted, but not direct. You know, I actually started considering a career in national security when I was in college. In fact, I was had joined ROTC at St. John's University in Queens, and did 2 years before deciding I wasn't going to move forward. And every once in a while, particularly when I come up to West Point, because you know, it's good, you know, to kind of provide that reflection as to why I did not choose that path at that time. And I wasn't out at the time, but it was still a time of don't ask and don't tell. And if it wasn't specifically in my mind that that was the reason I was not going to sign up, I think at some level I knew there was going to be struggles for inclusion. So to sit here at West Point today, having worked now for over 15 years in national security, I think is a mark of how far you all have come and how far the national security establishment has come. I still found my way in here. You can get rid of me, you know, so here I am working in national security still in a civilian capacity, and it's been a career that I would not trade it for really any other. My experience has been pretty diverse. You know, I've essentially worked both intelligence from the Title 50 organization standpoint with DIA, moved to NYPD where I was doing intelligence from a law enforcement standpoint. I worked at the federal level, to the local level, back to the federal level. And so my experience in terms of approaching national security has been informed by each one of those experiences. But I think what's most interesting to me is in that kind of through line of intelligence is some of the things that I've picked up and noticed in relation to kind of the value that diversity brings to this problem set. And what I mean by that is, you know, I spent a lot of my time, and you know, I have to think sometimes about, you know, why I'm here sitting at this panel. Am I here as a gay man? Am I here as an Indian man? Am I here as a Hindu man? All of those identities belong to me, right? And I do want to give a shout out to the West Point Mother this morning for bringing up the issue of religious diversity. I think that's something that's extremely important when you're not part of a religious minority. And again, another kind of component that is important in inclusion. We talk about the mission here. But when you think about this one particular identity, say for example, being a gay man who was not out, and how much thought and how much energy is spent trying to fit into climates that traditionally have not been friendly, and how much of that energy could have been expended in other pursuits in pursuit of that mission. You know, I think to move past that and move to a place where we're allowing people to bring their whole selves to work and to the mission is extremely, extremely important. And when we think about intelligence, you know, there is nothing more important, I would argue, for a professional intelligence analysis or somebody in the intelligence profession to really be able to put yourselves in somebody else's shoes, to think about an issue or a prospect or a problem or a mission from somebody else's vantage point. And I will tell you, as a closeted gay man, that was what I was doing my entire life, right? You live your life thinking about how others perceive you. What am I going to say? What are they going to think? How are they going to react? And as much as I spent my life doing that, I think there is a strong kind of parallelism in terms of bringing that skill set over into the intelligence world. And that's not something that I think is intuitive to a lot of people, but I do think it speaks to the value of experiential diversity in national security, because what you are doing is bringing people that are able to navigate difficult circumstances, complex circumstances, being able to understand perspectives that may not be their own and having to navigate that and still being able to extract value from that. And I think that's one of the key points about having a diverse workforce is making sure that you're bringing that experience to bear on the mission that you're trying to accomplish. Now, from the years of work that I've done in national security, there have been other kind of touch points that I think pretty clearly indicate why the diversity has been so critical to our success. So I draw, for example, from my experience at NYPD after 9/11, and we think about the problems that we were looking at in terms of trying to understand the threat we were facing in a rapid fashion, using essentially what was a municipal law enforcement agency to try and take on a global threat. And the one thing that the NYPD was able to bring to the table was its ability to draw from the diversity of the citizenry that it served, which is to say the citizenry of New York City. And that served, I think, really more than anything else in that department's success, because it was able to not only recruit for folks that had the kind of formal skill set of national security training or police training, but they were able to recruit from the folks that had the cultural, the linguistic fluency in some of the populations that we would be most interested in. And I think that was a huge value add in what we had brought to the table in terms of the CT fight. When we talk about kind of comparing the assets of that department to, say, some of our federal counterparts. And you kind of take that philosophy and you move it forward, right? And you think about diversity not just in the sense of what you can see in the languages and necessarily religion, but again, what we spoke about earlier this morning, which is perspective, right? And so we think about my place now at Capitol Police and how we're looking to build out an intelligence team there that is ready to meet the threat that we have to face down every day. And it is a wide spectrum of anti-government sentiment that we have to defend against, right? And that's not just talking about what we saw on January 6th, but it's also talking about foreign terrorist organizations. It's about talking about threat actors for whom we don't even have a name yet. And to be able to kind of think forward about what that threat is going to look like, anticipate what that threat, how to respond to that threat, and to be able to, again, incorporate that perspective into that analysis is what's going to be important to keeping the Capitol, the members of Congress safe. One of the things that we've done is to make sure that we're kind of open in the talent that we're bringing to the team on the intelligence side. And so not only are we talking about, as I mentioned, kind of demographic diversity, but perspective diversity. And we've valued, for example, integrating our officers' experience with their analyst experience. In fact, we have officers that are now coming over to the analyst ranks, and we're welcoming that. Why? Because they have perspective, having served as Capitol Police officers, many of whom served on January 6th. They're going to bring that perspective to the table that some analysts may not have, having just done analytical work their entire career. That kind of teamwork is what's going to be essential to making sure that we're successful, and that's something that we're continuing to pursue, in my current role. I will also say that, from the perspective of being a minority and serving this country is something that I hold dearly. I am a first generation American-born individual. My parents immigrated here from India in the early 70s. And public service was kind of crucial to even my parents' identities. My dad is a social worker, my mom a librarian, and they kind of inculcated in their children, me being one of them, the value of public service and the value of giving back. And I think that's been a gift. And I think, being able to leverage my experience being either a racial minority or a religious minority, LGBT, a member of the LGBTQ community, and still find a way to serve this country in a way that I'm very proud of has been a great blessing. And, I look back at my experiences, I'm kind of mid-career right now. Those 15 years included, helping to stop terrorist plots in New York, and included deployments to Afghanistan. It included, informing key policy and decision makers on what we need to focus on from a threat perspective and a threat mitigation perspective. And 20 years ago, if you told me, as a closeted gay man in college, that this is where I would be, I would tell you that you had no idea what you're talking about. But 20 years on, to sit here in front of West Point and speak to all of you in an audience like this, not only is it validating, but I think it's super inspirational. So I just want to end on that and say thank you.
Our second speaker is Dr. Nakissa Jahanbani. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Social Sciences. She also is my colleague at the Combating Terrorism Center, where she currently is working on projects that look at the evolution of Iran's relationship with its proxies in Iraq, Syria, and the African continent.
Hi everyone. I really don't know how I'm going to follow that, so just humor me, please. I'm going to organize my remarks in the following way. I'll share some of my experiences, but I'll basically talk a little bit about how I think the intersection of diversity issues and national security looks in the classroom as an instructor and as a researcher and colleague, both at service academies and civilian universities where I have experience teaching. I'll do my best to say cadets when I'm talking about experiences at service academies like USMA and students at civilian universities. And then I'll transition to where I think these initiatives might go in the future. I wouldn't be a good social scientist if I didn't define my concepts. So when I say diversity, I want to keep it as holistic as possible, beyond just gender and racial identities, inclusive of sexual orientation, learning differences like dyslexia and ADHD, accessibility, medical and mental health conditions, and the like. Just to give you a little bit about my background, my family are immigrated from Iran right before and after the revolution, so I'm first generation immigrant as well. Iranian American, and that's influenced some of my experiences too, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So I think it goes without saying, diversity is really important at the intersection of national security issues, otherwise we would all be doing something else today, right? And that goes to show whether at a service academy or a civilian university, but I think it has different implications for students versus professors. And as a professor, it really starts with the construction of the syllabus. When you're preparing, are we doing our due diligence? Are we pulling readings from scholars who are from different identities and from different perspectives, including theories, methodologies, and topics that might be outside of the mainstream? In political science, there are databases like Women Also Know Stuff and People of Color Also Know Stuff, and I'm sure there are similar mechanisms in other disciplines. It's continuing courses in race and equity studies, such as the one that Dr. Yon teaches, and inclusion of topics like cross-cultural competence and military leadership courses, which USMA already does, which is really remarkable. And in the classroom, when teaching, having a diverse classroom is important for analyzing topics related to national security. And I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of Ravi's comments. So for instance, in SS 465, which is a class I teach, is a survey course in terrorism studies, when we talk about grievances or the perceived differences that an individual may have when they compare their condition to somebody else, students from different backgrounds highlight different elements. And this sharing of experiences and opinions is so much more powerful for students and cadets when it comes from their peers rather than from an instructor. And I think it's an important element in empathizing, but not sympathizing with why someone might turn to this type of violent activity. And in the classroom, cadets can push their contemporaries to challenge these implicit biases. I see this daily in the classroom. I also saw it when I took cadets on an academic enrichment trip to the Middle East, where some of my more sheltered cadets didn't have the international experience, had not witnessed firsthand economic disparity and racial disparities, and were able to have their colleagues challenge their perspectives a little bit by sharing their own experiences because they were from a different background. Of course, we should guard against tokenism or calling on students for the sake of their identity, and I've been there when I've been a student in a foreign policy class in college, and someone turns to me for the Iranian perspective, which is crazy because I, have lived here my whole life. But it's a lot of pressure and you feel pigeonholed, right? And that's something that now as an instructor has been really healing because I'm able to remedy some of that. But these different perspectives can organically percolate in a class discussion. And again, it's so much more powerful coming from their peers than from an instructor. There is also some benefits to a diverse classroom aside from discussion. Cadets that speak different languages might be able to add nuances on understanding primary sources in other languages and turning to learning differences. I've had students who've had ADHD or dyslexia, and those that have ADHD, for instance, have had associative thinking, which is where you relate topics to each other in a nonlinear fashion, which can be beneficial and yield different results than linear thinking. There are benefits, but there are also challenges, because then the onus is on the instructor to be sensitive and be able to navigate these different discussions and threads in a meaningful manner that is both related to the topic at hand, but is also respectful of their experiences. It's, I think, as an instructor, important to amplify voices that may not be the first to participate for whatever reason, and making sure that everyone feels heard. It can also be challenging for instructors who are of a minority background to feel heard or to also share a lot, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So that's for students. As an instructor, I think there are different benefits and drawbacks. When educational institutions have a diverse faculty, they provide an opportunity for those with those different perspectives to be amplified with a level of authority. I think it's important to have people in administration and in academic positions who look like the student body. I think it's important for students to see themselves reflected in their faculty and in their staff. And I've had multiple female, multiple minority, and multiple female minority students and cadets come up to me and say they've never had a teacher that looked like me, which is really powerful. And it happens more often than I'd like. What I'd really like is to have a semester when no one says that to me. And that's where I hope it goes in the future. Having a diverse workplace normalizes those differences, both for students that might look, and cadets who look like me, and those that don't. I can share my experiences in the classroom, and there's a power differential in the classroom that works to my advantage, right? Assuming that I'm sensitive and appropriate when discussing issues, I swear I'm good at my job. I should be taken seriously and truthfully, and I always tell cadets and students to have a healthy dose of skepticism and to triangulate and find out more information and more experiences where they can, whether it's talking to their colleagues or doing additional research. But assuming that I can do those things, I might be able to change someone's perspective. Maybe someone who hasn't heard what it's like to be the child of immigrants, to walk in two worlds, to be American outside and Iranian at home, to speak two different languages, to think in a different language most of the time, and to navigate love and appreciation for both your family's chosen home and also the home that they had to leave, who's experienced racism and a whole host of other issues. I'm also very forthcoming with my students about my own mental health and my learning differences, just to normalize it. Hopefully in the future, the Army goes in such a direction where it'll even be more normalized than it is now, and I've been really heartened by all of the initiatives that I've seen in place about officers and NCOs being open about mental health and its significance with their cadets. And it's something that I've learned from my military colleagues to try to bring into the classroom too. But with sharing comes emotional labor, and it can be challenging, so it's something to be cognizant of. In the context of researcher and colleague, I think it's doing your part to remedy the ever-present citation gap that exists in most social sciences, and I'm sure it exists in the hard sciences as well, I'm just not as familiar. There's work by Dion, Sumner, and Mitchell in 2018 in political science, and Wu in 2023 in sociology that, among others, that indicate the citation gap is very much apparent. And it's looking to cite and bring in emerging scholars who might have differing opinions, who might have different backgrounds, and be from non-Ivy League institutions to be able to amplify those voices and those perspectives as well. Even in conducting research, I try to be as well-rounded as possible in my sample as well. If I'm conducting interviews, I look at the roster that I have in front of me. As many of you know, in national security issues, it is not the most diverse crowd, despite the crowd that's here. And so being cognizant of, as when I'm looking for Iranian SMEs to interview for a report, having a diversity of opinions, having a diversity, having different scholars of different backgrounds and so forth. And I think as a colleague, some of the same elements that are important for you as a researcher are also important for us as colleagues. It's amplifying the voices of other colleagues, especially women and minorities. It's affirming what they're saying and then adding to it. And if that sounds like yes-anding and improv, it's because it is. It's because it works. So saying something like, you know, as Rachel said, and then summarizing and then adding to it. And this is how I think we should build on it. And that is really important work, I think, for allies. And I've had, I'm very appreciative of coworkers when they do stuff like that. Research also indicates that women and minorities are often more tasked with service obligations because as DEI initiatives take place, then you also have to put those personnel into places where they can affect change, right? But then women and minorities tend to get overtasked. So it's being mindful of that the next time you're a supervisor asking someone to sit on a committee, or you're a colleague, making sure you're pulling your service weight as well. And of course, I've had a number of positive experiences, but I won't get into details about negative experiences, but they've stuck with me. And the thing that's worked are two things, and one of them is related to what I want to say. One is having a good support system. Second is having a good mentor. I have struggled in graduate school and after to find mentors that look like me. For better or worse. I've been much more fortunate in my professional career than I was as a graduate student. Arguably, as a graduate student, I needed it much more. So maybe thinking about that when you're looking at your cadets in your classrooms, thinking about who might need a mentor, and just someone that making yourself available so someone can call you if they find themselves in a situation. Yeah. And I think there are a couple of avenues I think diversity initiatives in national security can go in the future, and I'll just wrap this up really quickly, I promise. So in addition to continuing much of their really good work, I think addressing diversity issues could also help ameliorate some of the recruitment issues that USMA and the services may more broadly need. The service academies have made a huge push to diversify the student body, which I've seen anecdotally over the semester in my own classes, and I'm really heartened by it. And also, because I teach a class in terrorism, I'm also hoping that we're recruiting a broader and more diverse cadre of future analysts in terrorism and counterterrorism studies. And there's some truth to my anecdote. According to PAO, the class of 2026 minority enrollment is about 38% compared to 25% a little over a decade ago. So there are improvements that we can measure. But the issue about diversity at USMA is not limited to just the service academies, but the services more generally. As many of you are aware, military has had issues recruiting recently. The current rules do not necessarily permit for certain BMIs, mental health conditions, learning differences, certain medications. And part of this, I think, is society has changed, right? We're more aware of mental health and also accepting of accessibility and different medical and mental health issues. And I think the services in their academies are slowly adjusting, right? So I'm heartened to think that hopefully it'll be different in the future. The military has made huge changes historically, and why not one more? So with that, I will conclude.
Just so that I am not left out, I'm also first generation American. I feel like I need to, I'm half Dutch, half Jamaican. And my parents came right before I was born, actually. So I've also been here my whole life, except for a little jaunt to Jamaica for a decade. Okay, so I think our panel, and I want to thank you very much for both of your insights and for spending time with us here today. Our panel, I think, nests very well with the fireside chat that was going to happen this evening with General Clark on diversity as a Special Forces operational imperative. I was fortunate a little while ago to be asked to speak at a joint Special Operations University seminar on the importance of diversity in this particular environment and its imperative for national security and strategy. And being at West Point, my focus for that panel was on the importance of starting early in a person's career, right? So I teach cadets what is the importance of starting early in a cadet career to instill this kind of knowledge and understanding. So when I think about everything you've shared, and Nakissa touched on it, a bit, I think it seems clear we need to start with young people, right? We need to start with cadets, we need to start with newly inducted police officers, right? These are the people who start off on the ground. They can often have the most impact when they get out into their careers. So from your experiences, do you have any concrete things that you would like to see either in academia or, you know, maybe in police academies or, you know, areas where young individuals who are starting off their careers are being trained so that we are no longer questioning whether diversity and national security is actually important, is actually an imperative to our success in this realm?
It's an easy question. Okay. So, you know, we have, you know, at Capitol Police this year has just stood up our first LGBTQ Pride event. I think that was a huge step forward for the direction of the Capitol Police. And, you know, it was led by our Chief Diversity Officer, who I think has one of the best sayings that I've heard when it comes to diversity and inclusion work, and that is, diversity includes you. And if I were going to answer that question, I think that would be the perspective that I would want new recruits, new analysts, new staff members joining my team to really embody. And I think the reason that's important is because we want to make sure when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we are not excluding anyone inadvertently, right? And that the effort is meant to say that anybody could essentially struggle with belonging. Anybody can struggle with finding a way to voice their perspectives in an organization in which they don't feel they belong, and anybody can be part of that solution. And I think, you know, that training has to start at a very basic level. And, you know, whether that's in the academies for law enforcement or for services, whether that's, you know, at the very baseline of education, when we think about folks that are thinking about a career in national security, that kind of credo needs to be baked in, because we want to make sure that the perception isn't that progress for some is by default, you know, regression for others. This can't be zero sum, and I think so long as we can inculcate that at the ground level, I think we'll be better off as we move forward.
Oh, please. Oh, it's on. Okay, good. That's a great question, Rachel. Thank you. Maybe two things. Aside from the changes that I think we're already making in faculty hires, which is great, and I would love to see that continue. Maybe some form of a implicit bias training in a plebe level course or introductory course would be really good, and a way for faculty and cadets to start the conversation about why it's important to have different perspectives and what different perspectives might bring, and how to challenge your own biases, right? I think Harvard has a publicly available implicit bias like protocol that I've taken and I've had students take in the past, as just as a conversation starter, right? Or having a week on diversity and national security in a course that all plebes might take, for instance. And I think also just softening limitations on the restrictions, particularly when it comes to learning differences. So I think people who have different learning abilities might be good at different activities. Not everybody, and I understand that the Army is set up in a way where, within reason, you should be able to do most activities, right? But I think people with ADHD, for instance, might be good at analysis and may not necessarily have to, may not be well suited for other activities. And thinking creatively about where people with different abilities might be able to participate would be a meaningful change.
Can I just have another thought on this? And, you know, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But my whole career has been intel, right? But I do think, you know, the discipline of intelligence, I think, provides some really critical life skills that I think should be taught kind of at a basic level, whether, you know, because they're applicable to civics, they're applicable to just being, in my mind, a functioning, responsible citizen of this country, and that's just having strong understanding of critical thinking and understanding what an assumption is when you're making it, understanding how that assumption can get undermined, and what that does to your conclusions, right? It's really basic. I remember going to grad school, and you had to take the GMAT to go to grad school. And I take the prep course, and you've got these problems that are very logically oriented. But they have this exercise that they just basically really break it down. They're like, look, you're gonna make an argument, right? Your argument is gonna have a couple of components. It's gonna have evidence, it's gonna have assumptions, and it's gonna have a conclusion. Can you break down your argument into those things and then understand when one of those variables change, what it does to the others? And I think that was such a basic but critical exercise in being self-aware of how you think that I think is applicable to such a wide range of what we do here in national security and just being responsible citizens.
I'd like to turn to the audience if you have any questions for our panelists.
I apologize, man. Anyways, okay. By the way, introduction-wise, I asked my second question. I'm Cadet Officer Treasury, Company H2. I'm a young at West Point. I also see my old PL 100 teacher over there. Hi, Captain Clapton. Anyways, this question is directed at Mr. Ravi. So, you told us that you are an Indian man, and I'm actually a cadet of South Asian heritage as well. I'm Indian. My parents, I'm first generation American. My parents are they're from India, and they're of Nepalese heritage.
Yeah.
I honestly believe I think I'm the only Nepalese cadet here at West Point. And my question is I'm going to preface this first with a little bit of background for everybody so that they know, because it's kind of emotional. Especially after the 9/11 attacks and the introduction of the Patriot Act in the government, the South Asian community faced a lot of racism and a lot of prejudice. I've heard stories from Muslim neighbors, Sikh neighbors of their convenience stores getting burned down. I had a best friend growing up. His name was South Qureshi, Muslim. People thought it best to honor the victims of the 9/11 attacks on the anniversary of 2011 by beating him up on the football field in front of everyone to see. And I've seen people literally killed for just being Muslim. So one of the questions that I have is that how do we inspire members of the South Asian community to serve their nation, especially after having experienced that type of racism or stigma? And also, you being Indian, sir, you know that it's a really big thing for us. And this as well. It's a really big thing for us to we look at everything from an economic perspective. What makes the most money? Be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an engineer, right? What makes the most money?
That means your generation too, huh?
So I'm an ABCD, an American born confused basic, right?
I know well.
That's just how we're raised, right?
Yeah.
So I'm proud of what I do because I have warrior blood in me because that's just how my family's been. So it was an easy decision for me, but I'm more of an exception than the rule. I'm glad that here at West Point especially, I can name, I can only name a handful of Indian cadets that I've seen who are amazing cadets, but again, we're more the exception. We don't have that many people in the South Asian community serving their nation.
Right.
And although it's been in rising numbers, it's still a very big taboo in our community because people either think we're wasting our life away, it doesn't make enough money, so my big question is just, how do we get more people to come here and serve their nation? How do we get more people to be inspired about this? Because whenever I go back home, I'm never able to inspire people enough to bring them here.
Where's home for you?
Princeton, New Jersey.
Princeton, New Jersey. Yeah. Did you know? So I was going to make a joke, but it wasn't appropriate. We'll talk about it. But I love that question. I can probably fill up the whole day answering that question. So 9/11, I was 20, how old was I? I was 23. I was young. I was just out of college. I remember being on the LIE, taking the bus into Manhattan, and seeing the first tower on fire. By the time I get out the tunnel into my office, being told that the second tower was also hit, and we knew at that moment that this was a terrorist attack. My best friends growing up in Queens, if anybody here is from Queens will know that there you go. There is no more diverse place on the planet than that little piece of land. And my best friends at the time were, Arab, they were Muslim, and they got, it was not a good time for them. And it was a hard conversation for me to have with them to say that, hey, I'm going to go work under the Bush administration with the Department of Defense. And that is a very real conversation that we have to have with the people that are close to us and that who we love, who may not understand the decision. And I think, what was important on those one-on-one conversations to understand that one of the reasons that it was important to me to join that fight and this effort was because I needed to bring the perspective. If we weren't in the fight, who is going to have the perspective, as I mentioned before, that you do, and the experiences that you've had, and the experiences that your family have had, that should inform what our response to these crises are, right? If we are not in that game, then we're not influencing the outcome, right? And this was, to your point, this wasn't something that was, top, tier A career choice for my parents when they came here. They were like, yeah, you're right, doctor, lawyer, one of these things. And I wasn't any of those. It's funny because, I went to I did my master's degree at Johns Hopkins SITES, which is, a pretty good international relations school. But I told my parents I was going to Johns Hopkins. They're like, you're going to be a doctor. I was like, no, wrong school. But no, I think you got to have the conversations about why it's important to you, why it's important that we have, to the point of this whole conference, why it is important to have our perspective in formulating policy and responses to national security challenges that this country is facing as a whole. We can't be here and not contribute in that way, right? In my mind, being a responsible citizen means you're taking part in all aspects of that, of what this country demands of its population, and this is a critical component of that.
Thank you, sir.
I'm happy to talk afterwards too, to combine.
Look forward to that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Miguel Cotto from the Coast Guard Academy. I'm from Newburgh, North Carolina. And I feel there is a perception that as diversity is further promoted in the classroom, that pigeonhole you mentioned develops like a pressure for students of diverse backgrounds to be experts on their culture. So my question for you is just, how as an educator do you protect your students from that pigeonhole? And then how did you personally overcome that?
Oh, it's a hard question. It's good. Personally, it's the same thing that I would recommend for students. I rebelled against it. So I would just put up, maybe rebelled is a hard word, put up boundaries. So sometimes you can put up boundaries through humor or you can be direct. But I would tell professors, I'm all fresh out of Iranian ideas today, sorry. And depending on how spicy I was feeling that day. Or I can say, I think so-and-so had a really interesting point. Can we go back to that? You can pivot, right? In the classroom, if I see cadets or students turn to their minority peers and ask for their opinion, I will intervene, right? And we're lucky, right? I have a small classroom of 18 to 20 max in more robust semesters. And so I'm able to have that level of control. I think that would be a lot more challenging in a bigger classroom. And when I've taught online classes at my previous institution and that sort of activity has happened on a discussion board, I will call it out, right? I'll start independently, right? Directly with the student, privately, and then if it continues, escalate, right? So there's a lot of, again, control that an instructor has to be able to navigate that. But I think you bring up a really good point, and a lot of times, and it might follow in your career too. So it's good that you're asking that question now and developing healthy boundary setting in here, where the stakes are considerably lower than when you're in charge of people in the Army, and also then beholden to more resources and higher stakes in the operational Army. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Yvette. I'm from Northern Virginia. I'm a first year coming I2. And I guess my question is more abstract, but it's really asking, can you guys explain for the panel kind of the learning curve of really inclusion and understanding the curve of diversity, right? When you come to a group that is, I guess from a military perspective, that as a platoon, you're coming to my platoon all across the country, the world. I don't know these people, they don't know me. And can you explain the curve of me getting to know them and me getting to understand them, and then where we come to our peak, we're building this great team, and what that looks like, maybe in academia and also in the I guess public sector as well.
Sure. So it's an interesting question. You know, I'm kind of confronting that question now. As I mentioned, I'm new in my role. One of the challenges is, you know, get to knowing the people that you will be leading. And I don't think that's totally dissimilar from the challenge you face in joining a platoon, for example, and you don't know the people that you're going to be working with on a daily basis. And, you know, so I can talk to you about my experience in doing this and kind of my approach, which I think pulls from my own experience in being so self-conscious of my identity at all times, and being sensitive to the prospect that how people present may not be who they are. And, you know, for me, I think the critical value that I place is making sure that I understand the people that work for me, their stories, why they're here, how they got here, what they want to contribute, where they want to see this go, and how they think they can push it in that direction. And so one of the things that was important to me when I came on board was to make sure that I sat down with everybody that fell under my command as one-on-ones when I started a year ago, to say, walk me through all of this, right? Because I want to know who you are. I want to know, you know, the team that I'm leading. I want to be able to know how to motivate you and get you guys to where we need to be. But that is something that everybody can do, right? You know, so if you're new to a group, even though it's difficult, to make sure that you know, you're having those conversations, because you want to know the people that you're standing shoulder to shoulder with, right? And you may be the first person to do it, but if that becomes part of the culture, then you won't be the last person doing that. Becomes kind of part of the change that you're looking to implement. And so, you know, if for whatever reason, in any group that you're in, you're not feeling that, and you need to be the one to start that, well, I think that is an experience that many of us in the student have had before, right? It takes a little bit of courage to get that going. But my experience says that you are going to find allies in that effort in places that you did not expect to find allies. So that's kind of
I think it's really great that you brought up you sat down one-on-one. I do something similar with my students at the beginning of every semester. So we have a 20-minute session where I have a couple of questions and I let them have some questions for me. Typically, no major confessions are ever brought up in that 20 minutes, but I have found for semesters I have done it versus not, cadets are a little bit more open and understanding and will come to me if they have issues. And I really took that cue from my department over COVID when we onboarded new people. They would set up, and I think other departments did this too, like 2 to 3 person sessions online where a more senior person would sit down with with like someone who's been there for a year or two with 1 or 2 new people. And it was an opportunity to have that touch point and create that familiarity, which pays dividends later.